Americans are a sick people. I mean, we don't necessarily know that. I mean, we see people on the screen all the time, and they look pretty good. But I'm going to give some statistics here. I hope they're not too long, but at least that'll establish my point that Americans are a sick people. According to the CDC, 40% of school-aged children have at least one chronic illness, and it's rising quickly. And if you take out the leading cause of death in children, which is gunshot wounds, a child in 2023 was 15 to 20% more likely to have a chronic disease compared to a child in 2011. There's no known reason for this. I mean, we suspect something in the environment is causing it, maybe household products and pollution and food additives. But chronic diseases are now the dominant health challenge in the United States, affecting nearly 60% of adults. And we might not be as healthy as we thought. And there are theories about why this is the case and why this has increased so much, but no one really knows for sure. Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. has made chronic disease, especially in children, a central theme of his health advocacy and political reform. He blames exposure to environmental toxins as the leading cause, but he has also tried to link autism to vaccines and medical procedures, arguing that the pharmaceutical companies exert undue influence over the regulatory bodies. Kennedy says that when his uncle, John F. Kennedy, was president, most of you probably remember him, that 6% of American kids had chronic health problems. Today, that is 60%. And that includes autoimmune diseases, diabetes, ADD, ADHD, autism, obesity, asthma, food allergies, and other chronic health conditions. These have been skyrocketing. In 2000, 1 in 150 children had autism. Now it's 1 in 31. That's incredible. In 1960, they think it might have been 1 in 1,500. And nobody knows why the increase has been so dramatic. We know why type 2 diabetes and fatty liver disease has been increasing in children. We can trace it back to the increase of these diseases, to the rapid increase in the consumption of highly refined foods, especially fruit, drinks, and soft drinks. And the appropriately named junk foods also have made their contribution to our ill health. And it isn't just children who are affected. It was virtually unknown before 1980. This non-alcoholic fatty liver disease now affects 30% of all adults. Researchers are also sounding the alarm about the rapid increases of certain kinds of cancer. And we hear about this all the time, but when you add it all up, we could conclude that we've got some health problems. In spite of all the knowledge that we have gained about the human body and how it functions, and we have the advantages of modern medicine, they are still increasing. And we can only guess why, but there is one who knows. And he has warned us about what is coming on the earth. I've just been reading, I'll warn you right now, I've been reading Counsels on Health. So you may pick up a lot of the ideas from that. But it comes under, God has given us information about our bodies and minds and how to take care of it. And it comes under the heading of temperance. And this is not something that has been promoted for a while. I'm not sure why, but we've kind of dropped the ball on that. maybe because it's not popular, because it does require some self-denial. Maybe we're under the misconception that everybody's healthy. There are several reasons why we should take this seriously. And it isn't just because we want to feel better. It isn't just because we'd like to have more energy or live longer, or even because we want to avoid disease and doctor visits. Here's an interesting statement from Counsels on Health in page 449. God requires his people to be temperate in all things. And unless they practice true temperance, they will not and they cannot be susceptible to the sanctifying influence of truth. Now, did you catch that? Unless we practice true temperance, we will not and cannot be susceptible to the sanctifying influence of the truth. That means what we eat affects our moral and spiritual perceptions. According to Paul, the fruits of the Spirit include love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. You try those things on a sour stomach. It gets exceedingly difficult. You can ask your family about it. They already know. I want to talk about temperance this morning in the context of the soon return of Christ, which I think probably most of us think isn't far off. In fact, it seems like most Christians think it's not far off. And while probably all of us think Christ's coming is soon, the concept is out there that we really don't need to prepare for it. People just assume that since they believe in Jesus, they are prepared and that he is their advocate to whitewash all their deformities. You've heard this. You know what I'm talking about, right? Maybe. So Christ is our high priest, and as high priest, he's functioning several roles. But today, one of them is described in Malachi chapter 3, verse 2 and 3. Who can endure the day of his coming? Who can stand when he appears? For he is like a refiner's fire and like a fuller's soap. He will sit as a smelter and refiner of silver, and he will purify the sons of Levi and refine them like gold and silver, so that they may present to the Lord offerings in righteousness. And so that's what's going on today. Now, we know in general the world is becoming more like Sodom and Gomorrah. There is more intemperance, drug use, violence, and all that goes with it. And there is an interesting connection between intemperance and immorality. You can find that in Ezekiel 16:49. It says, "Behold, this was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had arrogance, abundant food, careless ease, but she did not help the poor and the needy. Thus they were haughty and committed abominations before me. Therefore I removed them when I saw it." So intemperance not only sooner or later ruins your life, it dulls your moral and spiritual perceptions. And if we lose self-discipline in one area, we've lost it in other areas too. And as the time for Christ's return approaches, we are to prepare to meet Christ by purifying our lives and seeking something the Bible calls sanctification. Remember that word? And the devil has made sure that this is another subject that isn't getting much attention. And as far as I can tell, God intends that we overcome and gain the victory over sin and corruption that is in this world. Okay? And all this stuff goes together. And the current approach has been to soften God's law, and health laws are also God's laws. I am somewhat disgusted with a lot of the current theology that I think makes people weak and helpless. And so all it does is talk about forgiveness and mercy, which are, I mean, I'd like to preach another sermon on that, but not at the expense of righteousness, self-denial, and judgment. Mercy and truth really go together if you understand them right. But in Counsels in Health, it says it is never convenient to take up the cross and follow the path to self-denial, but this must be done. God wants all to have His grace and His Spirit to make fragrant their life. And I think that should be something we all want. And this idea is pervasive in the Bible and the spirit of prophecy, and you have to be blind to miss it. The modern gospel has been adapted to the needs of the modern individual who has modern medicine to put him back together after he suffers the consequences of intemperance. But we end up with a weakened gospel that does not save anyone. See, Paul offers an entirely different view of this. He says, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, the Jew first and also the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, that is written, the righteous, the just, the righteous man shall live by faith. And the bottom line is the gospel changes people. Okay? And I think probably any Christian would accept that statement with limitations. Right? They don't think God really means to deliver them entirely from the bondage of sin. Just somewhat. Jesus said, if the Son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. And he's talking about freedom from sin. And you check that out in John chapter 8, because that's what it's talking about. And the problem is, if we do not believe it, we will excuse ourselves and evade dealing with the problems and become more a slave to sin than we were before. When Jesus commended a lawyer who understood the purpose of the law and explained it like this, he answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And that's what it is about. Not a part commitment. You don't go halfway in. You either take it or leave it. Because Christ is after the whole person. There is a change required by the whole person. Anything less than that is not going to inspire anybody. The reason there's little life in the church sometimes is because we've lowered our sights. Nobody gets excited about not achieving anything or not needing to. If we drift along and aiming at nothing, we will get it. And then it gets boring because we drive off the Spirit of God and everything has changed and we don't know it because there's no Spirit, there's no conviction of sin, and change is now impossible. This might not agree with everybody's theology of salvation, but if you have any questions, come and see me, because I'm just getting started. The evidence is overwhelming, and it amazes me how often it is shoved aside for something else that doesn't help anybody. And eternity is at stake. This is your life. Don't mess with this subject. The Bible does not teach that God is going to change us just a little bit. The righteousness of Christ isn't about making somebody a little bit better. Jesus never half-healed people. John 3:4 states, for God does not give the Spirit by measure. In other words, he doesn't dole out little parts of the Spirit to people. He doesn't make us a little better. He wants to change the person, the whole person. When on earth, Jesus went about restoring health, both mental, physical, moral. And he still has this power. And here's what Paul says about the gospel. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. He doesn't say some things. He doesn't say, you can hang on to this if you give up this. God's not negotiating with us. He doesn't tell us, well, most things are beyond you, so don't try too hard because you're probably helpless to make any changes anyway. That idea is not in the Bible. And I don't know about you, but I don't have any use for a weak and insipid religion. It does not inspire anybody. There's nothing about it that is going to motivate or excite or get enthusiastic about. Just remember, you're not doing this on your own. You don't have to throw in the towel and maybe hope that you'll just get by and sneak into heaven. In Ephesians 6:10 it says, finally, brethren, be strong in the Lord and the power of his might. We need to talk a lot more about God's power instead of human weakness. But to experience this, you have to believe and commit to it. It won't do anything for you if you make a partial commitment or just say, well, I'm going to give up some things. I'll quit beer and just drink coffee or something. I don't know. The entire person, God is after the whole person. Another statement from Counsels on Health. The time has come when each soul must be staunch and true to every ray of light God has given, and begin in earnest to give this gospel of health to the people. We shall have strength and power to do this if we practice these truths in our own lives. So why should we be interested in temperance? I suppose if I was going to rate this sermon, I'd say, well, it's somewhat aggressive, okay? But God told us to be temperate. That's part of our message. And one other principle I don't believe in. I do not think that Christians will continue to live in disobedience to God. Is that a fair statement? To live in disregard for his law, for the principles he has given us for our own blessing, that is something Christians won't do. Being a follower of Christ means following Christ. And you can be one of his followers whenever you choose. You look at the example of Israel in the journey through the wilderness, and we can learn something about human nature. Human nature didn't die with the Israelites. We should study them and what they did, because in doing so, we're studying ourselves. And what was their attitude? Were they excited about the changes God made in their lives? Were they eager to follow his commands and find out what he was teaching them to do? This infinitely wise and caring God who delivered them from bondage, set them free, provided for all their needs. Were they singing praises to him? No, they might have had a high for a few days after crossing the Red Sea, but it didn't last. And God miraculously intervened to give them food and water. And what did they do? They complained about it. It says in Numbers 21:5, the people spoke against God and Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness where there is no food or water? And then they said, and we loathe this miserable food. Do you think we might be that foolish? I mean, God's plan in this was to remove the terrible diseases that were plaguing the Egyptians. That's what it says in Exodus 15:26. If you will give ear to his commandments and keep his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you which I have put on the Egyptians, for I, the Lord, am your healer. And just maybe he wants to do the same thing today. He gave us information about how to live. instructions about what would be a proper diet for our time, and I think he knew what he was talking about. If people trust God, they know that he loves them. Do you think they might do what he says? I mean, he's really intelligent. Maybe they think he was a little extreme when he said it was a sin to use alcohol, tobacco, coffee, and tea. Maybe our judgment's better than that. But there is an increase in disease among man and beast in the way animals are raised in confinement today. And the way they are handled should be enough to us to think about eating their flesh. Councils of Health also says animals are diseased, and by partaking of their flesh, we plant seeds of disease in our own tissue and blood, and disease in animal is increasing in proportion to the wickedness of men. Is there a relationship between this and the chronic illnesses that Americans are suffering from today? I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows, but I think we ought to trust him with it because he does. And he knew what was coming. I mean, is God really wise? Is he really good? Is he trying to help us? Is he trying to make his people stand out? How do you do that? Well, you tell them the truth. You tell them the truth, and then they can do something with it. What God has done is for our good, our health, both body and spirit. You know, health professionals also say there is a terrible increase in depression in our country. And that's behind a lot of the teenagers committing suicide. And for some reason, it's high in this community. Is it possible that the things regarding our well-being have anything to do with what and how we eat? I worked for a few months with a guy who he was a young fella, and he looked healthy and fit, and he lived on Red Bull. And if you get online and look at the advertisements, this is going to do you a lot of good. They use the finest ingredients. You know, he was good for about 20 minutes. And after that, he had to have another one. And it would get him charged up, and he'd go for a little bit longer. And I don't know how he is now, but I don't know how he could live like that. The fact is, processed foods are killing us. And the information is out there to tell you that, and I think you all know it. Like I said, I don't know what causes all our chronic diseases, but God does. In any case, your body is your home. Amen. That is where you live, and every part of it has a bearing on your well-being. You can't separate your mind from your body, from your spirit. Our spiritual health is tied up with physical health, as well as we can do with it in this world. And our spiritual perceptions and our ability to respond to purity and truth are connected with the health of the body. In 7 Testimonies 14, it says, those who place themselves under God's control to be led and guided by him will catch the steady tread of events ordained by him to take place. Now, presumably, if we don't place ourselves under his control, we won't discern what is going on, and therefore we won't be prepared. You know, by our behavior, we reveal to the world the depth of our faith in God, in his goodness, his wisdom, and his care. Now, the question is the principle, but I like it, is that the determining factor in our choices? Do we have to have that beer or that hot dog? Are we trapped by YouTube and porn? All this is related. Is it too hard to shut off a movie you shouldn't be looking at, which is almost all of them? Are we bringing into our minds that which will enhance violence and immorality? Is it possible that we could let our minds rest by shutting off the stupid phone? I mean, be honest about it. Or are we so possessed by this modern psychotic world that is beyond our capability, and we have brought it into a weak theology that doesn't help anybody? Again, we need to talk about God's power because he can save us from all this. Christ's object lesson says, as the will of man cooperates with the will of God, it becomes omnipotent. In other words, no matter what your condition, no matter how many times you have failed, no matter how many times your promises have been broken, you keep coming back because whatever can be done, whatever is to be done at his command may be accomplished in his strength. And he has plenty of it. All his biddings are enablings. Now that kind of a gospel, inspires me somewhat. It gives hope. This isn't the popular description of salvation, but it never has been. Of course, we have an advocate in heaven. As our high priest, he's interceding for us. And right now, he's providing just what we need. But he's not going to intercede forever. Soon it's going to end. And we need to take advantage of his help today. The principle of self-denial is fundamental to the Christian faith. And we can maintain it only as we think of Christ, of what he has done, of what it cost him. And so this is something we have to plan for each day. Study this material. Bring it into your life. I know every morning I spend at least an hour just reading and praying and thinking about what it says. And I don't listen to too many preachers online. I just don't. Carol, I find that what we read in the Bible in the spirit of prophecy is different from the usual round of cliches that gets pawned off as Christianity with no power. Without surrender to the will of God, there is no life. David's asked God to create in me a clean heart, and God will do just that. If we believe in his word, obey his commandments, he will save us. And a lot of people are going to tell you this sounds like righteousness by works. The Bible just calls it righteousness, and it only comes by faith. So just give it a try. Our closing hymn is Make Me a Captive Lord. I think you'll know that. Somebody told me they didn't, but it's a beautiful song. So that's page 568.